Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Qizhi. Coming up in this edition, France's National Day has coincided with the arrival of the Olympic torch, as the city is preparing to host the Summer Olympic Games later this month. US President Joe Biden has urged Americans not to go down the road of political violence after the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. And in Rwanda, millions of voters head to the polls in the presidential and parliamentary elections. We begin in Europe. A double celebration has taken place in Paris. France's National Day coincided with the arrival of the Olympic torch, as the city is preparing to host the Summer Olympic Games later this month. Ken Brown has more from Paris.
The party started early in Paris with France's Bastille Day on July 14th, celebrating everything French since 1880. A military parade, aerial shows, concerts and celebrations built up to the traditional fireworks show, and its flame burned even brighter on Sunday with the arrival of the Olympic torch. Football star Thierry Henry kicked things off on the Champs-Élysées, and China's superstar classical musician Lang Lang carried the torch too, picking up the flame at Le Sénat, showing all his experience.
So this is my fourth time running the Olympic torch after Beijing, London and Brazil. And this time it's quite a special time because it's the July the 14th, which is the French National Day. Olympics is always very special for me since when I was a kid, watching the games, getting encouraged, whether it's from the Chinese women's volleyball or to the big moment of Usain Bolt.
Lang Lang played the traditional July 14th concert, a prestigious event held in public, bringing some joie de vivre to the streets of the French capital. Now, while the Olympic torch continues on its 12,000-kilometre odyssey, Olympic fever is gripping here in Paris. The Paris 2024 Olympics will be unique thanks to the opening ceremony set to be held on the River Seine and the many events taking place in open-air stadia in public places. That moment grows ever closer with the opening ceremony on the 26th of July, where the Games will begin.
That was Ken Brown reporting from Paris. Then in North America, US President Joe Biden has delivered a national televised address from the Oval Office after the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. He said Americans must never go down the road of political violence, as he called for the temperature of politics to be lowered. Philip Crowther with the Associated Press has more from Milwaukee, where the Republican Party's convention is getting underway. Trump is set to accept the former Republican presidential nomination.
Look, it's only the most serious moments in American history when an Oval Office address is with Joe Biden calling for unity again, but more than anything, a lessening of the temperature, if you will, and calling on Americans not to choose the path of political violence. Here is some of what Joe Biden said.
And to remember, while we may disagree, we are not enemies. We're neighbors. We're friends, co-workers, citizens, and most importantly, we're fellow Americans. We must stand together. Yesterday's shooting at Donald Trump's rally in Pennsylvania calls on all of us to take a step back, take stock of where we are, how we go forward from here. Thankfully, former Trump is not seriously injured. I spoke with him last night. I'm grateful. He's doing well, and Jill and I keep him and his family in our prayers.
The president also saying in the Oval Office that he was going to return to the campaign trail pretty soon. Some campaign events have actually been postponed by the president, but also from the vice president. Of course, the former president Donald Trump will be back on the campaign trail soon, and of course here in Milwaukee at the Republican National Convention. He has already arrived here in the city, and this is a 4-day convention that starts Monday and goes all the way till Thursday. Now, the president in the Oval Office also spoke about the ongoing FBI investigation, which is clearly frustrating to those who want to find out a little bit more about why this actually happened, why it came to an assassination attempt on the current Republican Party candidate. The FBI says it does not know about a motive right now. It has not found any social media posts from the suspect that might indicate a political motivation for this assassination attempt. So right now what we're seeing from both sides of the aisle are calls for calm, not just from Joe Biden, but also from Donald Trump. We are right now inside of this sports arena here in downtown Milwaukee. It's impossible to get in for anybody without the right credentials. There's an inner perimeter, an outer perimeter. What we have seen so far hasn't been an increase in any security measures. In fact, the Secret Service has spoken about these security measures here at the Republican convention, saying that essentially they are happy with what they have organized so far and are confident this is going to be a safe convention.
That was Philip Crowther reporting. Meantime, China says it is following the shooting incident. The foreign ministry says Chinese President Xi Jinping has expressed sympathies to Donald Trump. Turning to Africa, more than 1,000 observers have been monitoring the presidential and parliamentary elections in Rwanda. Voting began on Sunday for Rwandans living abroad, with the first ballot cast in New Zealand, and Rwandans in China also participated. Artan Toshebia reports from Kigali.
A symbolic start to a hugely significant task, that of monitoring Rwanda's July 15 presidential and parliamentary elections. Over 1,000 electoral observers were flagged off to start their work officially. In Kigali and across the country, political party flags and posters have been replaced by national colors as the Electoral Commission prepares for Monday's polls. About 9.5 million people have registered to vote in the 2024 presidential and legislative elections, up from 6 million in 2017. Rwanda's national electoral body, NEC, has set up polling stations at major hospitals to facilitate voting for patients, caregivers and healthcare workers during the July 15 and 16 elections. The vote will last 3 days, starting Sunday, following a campaign that began on June 22nd. Results are expected by July 20th. Rwandans in diaspora cast their ballot at the country's embassies and consulates. In China, voter turnout was around 98%, with the majority being Rwandans studying in major cities, in addition to business people, according to the Rwandan ambassador to China.
The reports we are getting from the 7 polling stations that we have across China, the process went well, there was no any hiccup. The only time you had in a few cities, people who missed their trains going to the polling stations, but because the directives provide for request for overextension, and we applied that to the National Electoral Commission to allow us to add 1 hour before we close the polling stations, which was permitted, and they were able to arrive at the polling stations and they voted.
Partial results of Rwanda's presidential elections will be released by the evening of July 15th, with provisional results expected to come in by July 20th. Final results will be released by July 27th. If there are no disputes, the next president of Rwanda will be sworn in 30 days after the final results are published.
That was Artan Toshebia reporting from Kigali. In the Middle East, Hamas has denied halting indirect ceasefire talks with Israel following Israel's attack on Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed that the war will end only when all their goals are met. Sarah Coates has more from Tel Aviv.
These talks once again appear to be hanging in the balance in the wake of this assassination attempt on Mohammed Deif, a very senior Hamas commander. Now, we've also heard from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He held a press conference. He said that he's not absolutely certain that Deif was killed in Saturday's strike, but he did go on to say it's generated pressure on Hamas to soften its stance when it comes to negotiations. Now, we do understand that Benjamin Netanyahu will be holding a fairly high-level meeting with senior officials right here in Tel Aviv amid a lot of pressure from these family members and loved ones of these 120 or so Israeli hostages that do remain in the Gaza Strip. There were a number of demonstrations held right across the country over the weekend, with the Hostage and Missing Families Forum putting out a statement saying that by the time everyone comes to their senses and works together, there may be no one to bring back. And we do have a bit of a breaking news line for you amid this international pressure also for Israel and Hamas to come to a deal, and that is that Benjamin Netanyahu will meet President Biden at the White House on July 22nd, just 2 days ahead of that congressional address.
That was Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv. Finally, in Asia, official data shows China's gross domestic product grew 5% in the first half of this year. The value-added industrial output, an important economic indicator, expanded 6%. Fixed asset investment and retail sales of consumer goods continued to grow. Zhao Yunfei has more.
The latest data shows that in the first half of 2024, China's gross domestic product has reached 61.68 trillion yuan, or $8.65 trillion, and that's a 5% growth year on year. The National Bureau of Statistics, or NBS, on Monday also released separate figures of the first 2 quarters, showing the country's GDP expanded 5.3% in Q1 and 4.7% in Q2. An NBS spokesperson says the overall national economy has continued to improve in the first half in a stable manner due to support from policy incentives, rebound in external demand, and development of new quality productive forces. New quality productive force is a key term discussed over the past several months. It's an effort to upgrade industrial and supply chains, foster emerging industries, and promote innovation. China has set the goal in March for the country's annual GDP growth at around 5%, and this is a target under the consideration of evolving dynamics at home and abroad. The latest figure has shown how the country is developing a modernized industrial system with advanced manufacturing as the backbone and forging clusters of strategic emerging industries with international competitiveness.
That was Zhao Yunfei on China's latest economic data. Now, recapping today's headlines, France's National Day has coincided with the arrival of the Olympic torch, as the city is preparing to host the Summer Olympic Games later this month. US President Joe Biden has urged Americans not to go down the road of political violence after the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. And millions of voters in Rwanda head to the polls in the presidential and parliamentary elections. That's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a 1-hour podcast news magazine program. We would welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thanks for listening.